friends, my name is Marines, and this video, what is this video? I got inspired to rearrange this office library. So to give you way more context than you probably need, a couple things happened. Number one, the lights that I have up on my shelves, the LED strip lights, stopped working, and so I need to pull out the old ones, and I already ordered new ones to put back there again, but in order to do that, I have to like remove books and stuff. So I thought it would be a good excuse to dust and clean the shelves, but also to take stock of my collection. I am running out of space on the three main shelves that I have, and I've been stacking things, and like I've got piles of books elsewhere, and so I kind of want to look and make sure that everything that's there is stuff that I really want, and if not, to make room for like new things that I've read and love. I will tend to keep any book that I read that is like 3 stars or higher, and often when I'm going back and sort of like double checking and doing unhauls, it is like those 3-star books that I'm like, do I really need to keep this? Will I ever read this again? That kind of make up the ones that are first on the chopping block. This might turn into a little bit of an unhaul, depending on what I find when I reassess my books. The thing I really want to do is buy like 2 narrow shelves to go on either side of my 3 main shelves. This style of bookshelf actually has like narrow ones that come and can be slotted in perfectly in the space that I have available, but I really would love to move out of this apartment. The goal is 2025, get a new job, move out of this apartment, and so the idea of like buying more things that I will eventually need to move out of here when I already know that moving these books and these shelves is going to be a pain in the butt, like I don't think that that's the smartest thing. I'm just going to go through my collection and see if I can free up some space. The second thing that I would like to do is move my desk, which is currently up against this wall where I'm facing you guys, back to where it was in the middle of my office. So I moved it from there to up against the wall because earlier this year I was working 2 full-time jobs, so it made keeping monitors and multiple laptops easier when this was up against the wall, and like better to hide all of the cords and stuff. But that is no longer true, and so I would like to, like, I like my desk better over there, and so since I'm no longer needing the space to be situated this way, I don't know, I just want to move things around. Okay, so the thing that really happened is that I brought out all of my fall decor, and I had like a bunch of extra things, and I realized that I had like also used to decorate my desk, and I can't because it's like pushed up against my wall, and I was like, oh. It is what it is. I am going to take you on this journey, cleaning, organizing, decorating this office. I will also be listening to some audiobooks while I do this, so I can talk to you about them. I'm currently in the middle of 2 books. One is How to Read Now by Elaine Castillo, and I'm loving this so much. I'm not sure that I want to listen while I work because I've been co-reading it, and like there are so many lines and things that I'm highlighting, and so I want to be able to annotate and focus as I listen to that. So the second book that I'm currently listening to as well is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, and I'm about 20% of the way through that book, and I'm loving the beginning so far. And it feels like the right vibe. It's like a romp, very adventure-y, so that feels like it might fit better. And so yeah, I'm bringing you along on whatever this journey is. Here's where we're starting. It's a bit of a mess. So these are the boxes that had my fall decor. I've already taken a bunch of stuff out and put it elsewhere in my apartment. This box is like all of my day-to-day decor. Like I washed everything to put away because they won't be seen until next year, because after fall I'll put out my Christmas decor. So that's all washed. I just need to put it in a box to put away. And I've got some like book mail to unbox and like other things that publishers had sent me that I need to find a place for. My desk is a mess. I just recorded a live for Agatha All Along, so I need to clean up my desk. You can see like more books stacked up over there as well. So just need to like organize and clean everything up and then figure out where I want everything, and then of course redo the lights and everything on this shelf. I put everything back on my shelf that has my graphic novels and comics and manga, and there are a few things that I turned around that I want to get rid of because they're an author that I no longer want to support, but it's always that thing of like an author you no longer want to support and then putting that work into someone else's hands. So until I can figure out what to do, I just kind of set them off to the side and turn them around, which freed up some space over here because they were displayed before and now they're just kind of off to the side. And there's two things that I found that I want to unhaul. One is this one, Summer, and this is by Jillian and Mariko Tamaki, and I remember very much enjoying this when I read it. I think, like, based off of memory, because it's been years now, I gave it somewhere between like a 3 and 4 star. It is not one that I've ever reread, and like thinking about if I ever will, it's probably not likely. And it's like a book that I think has a better home. Like I want to get this into the hands of somebody who will reread it and enjoy it and maybe even love it. And I didn't even know that I have this. I don't know if it was like a gift or something, but it's called The Artist in the Office: How to Creatively Survive and Thrive 7 Days a Week. And it's like a little workbook with like, I mean, not a workbook, but it has like things to do to like keep your creativity up while you're working like an office job. And it's very cute. And there are a couple of books that I would like to highlight. One is Shoplifter by Michael Cho. This is the first ever graphic novel that I read, and I gave it 3 stars when I read it. So this is another one. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm ready to unhaul this. I'm pretty sure if you go back and watch my series from 2020 when I was like doing a massive unhaul of my shelves, that I probably said the same thing about this book, about like hanging on to it for the sentimentality of like it being the first one that I read, which again, I was like, okay, am I ready to unhaul this? And I wasn't. I was like, nah. So that one's staying. And then the other thing that happened as I was putting this back is that like I'm seeing some of these books and I'm like, oh, I'd love to reread that, or I would love to finish that series. And so I'm going to name off a few books that I'm going to put on a TBR. And when I had this idea, part of me was like, well, it's just like unfinished series. I could put like every unfinished series on a spinning wheel. I'm obsessed with spinning wheels right now, or like some other thing, right? But it isn't quite that. Like, it isn't just all of my unfinished series. It's specifically going through my shelves and being like, oh no, wait, something about this is calling to me in this moment of like, I really want to try and prioritize that. So one is Emma, and I read 3 volumes of Emma, and I think there's maybe 6 of them total. So I got halfway through it and I never finished. And it's one of those things that, again, I gave like between 3 and 4 stars, but every time I see them, like I think fondly of my reading experience and of the characters. It's just something that I want to like tidy up and finish up. So that is going on to this impromptu TBR that I'm making right now as I'm going through my shelves. And Monstrous. I read this first volume and really enjoyed it. I think that this was one of the last things that I read when I was coming down from reading a lot of graphic novels. So I want to prioritize like reading more volumes of this. You know, this video is just like vibes only. It's becoming what I want it to become. So now we're building a TBR. Those 2 things are on it. All of my romances are now in, and I am unhauling 3 books from that section. So 2 of these are by Christina Lauren. So first is Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. This was my first Christina Lauren, if I'm not mistaken, and I remember enjoying this, but I also don't remember much about it at all. It just makes me feel like I'm okay to let this go, and if I ever, for whatever reason, want to revisit it, like a library book is fine. And In a Holidays was a book that we picked for House Salt Book Club, and again, I don't remember much about it, but I do remember like the lingering memory is that I really did not like this, and I spent like that hour mostly roasting this book. I think that I kept it. Why did I keep this? There was a reason I kept this. And now I just cannot recall. So if I can't even remember the reason that I kept this, even though it was like below a 3 star, I'm pretty sure it was below a 3 star. It feels good to let go. And then the next one is The Proposal by Jasmine Guillory. Again, I remember liking it when I read it. but not enough that I remember anything about this book that I've ever reread it. Just feels okay to let that go. I wanted to highlight this book, which is The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. Since I'm getting rid of two Christina Laurens, I read this one a year or two ago, and I actually really like this. Like, the science is wishy-washy, I get that, but I did enjoy this couple a lot more than some of her other work, and I really like the way that they work through conflict. I remember that really sticking out to me as well. I gobbled this up, I enjoyed the characters, and it's like one of the better Christina Laurens that I've read. As for what I'm adding to my TBR, two of these are actually just inspirations of like seeing books and being like, I really like that, I should read more from this author. So one is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I love this, and I have been pretty like cold on romances this entire year. I really have read only a handful, where like going back a couple years into my reading, it was my second most read genre, and this was one of my more recent-ish romance reads where I was like all in, and I really, really loved what it was doing. So I want to try Tia Williams' most recent book, Love Song for Ricky Wilde, I think is the title. I will correct myself if needed, but that's going on the TBR. And the next one is One to Watch by Kate Stayman London. I remember this one was pretty contentious with like the fat representation in this, but I think that it was pretty clear in what it was exploring and like encountering any negative messages that it brought up. Like, it was for a purpose. Our character was going through these things, and the book was very careful to be like, but that's not healthy, and this is like what she's working through. So that felt intentional to me, and the story worked for me. I have been watching The Bachelor for a long time, so like the concept and everything worked for me, and I'd like to try Kate Stayman London's newest book. I think it's a vampire book. I had been seeing the cover around in a few places, and I hadn't ever clicked onto the author, and so now seeing this on my shelf and remembering that this really worked for me, and thinking about her new release, I'm adding those two to my TBR, shelf-inspired TBR. And the third thing is a finishing of a series, and that is these interconnected Evie Dunmore books. I've read Bringing on the Duke twice, and I've really enjoyed it. I did not really love A Rogue of One's Own all that much, and I started the third book, and it starts with such a like viscerally embarrassing moment and scene that I put it down and I never went back to it. But I've heard really good things about that third book, and I just have to like push my way through it. So this is my sign to myself to do that, to push my way through it. This is my nonfiction section, and I've also got poetry in here as well. These are just this way because they're oddly shaped. They're like short books, and so I just tacked them there. I'm not unhauling any of this. I also don't have any TBR books coming from this section, but a quick highlight for Little Weirds by Jenny Slate. It is a little collection of like essays that are deeply personal, sprinkled with like this microfiction with a lot of like magical realism in between. It felt really different and fresh and unique, and it was very weird, but also incredibly earnest. And if you guys have ever heard me talk about books that I love things that are like sort of unapologetically earnest, and this very much was. This row here is all of my contemporaries and historicals, so like non-genre fiction, and it is adult and YA, and I got rid of a lot. Some of the stuff I'm like, am I really doing this? I think I am, friends. So the first three books that I am unhauling are all from Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, this is kind of opposite to what I've said previously about like books that I liked at the moment, but I don't ever see that I will reread them. I did reread both Daisy Jones and the Six and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo for a video I did, I think earlier this year, where I was rereading like popular Goodreads books, and I disliked both of these more on reread. I think because of the more problematic aspects of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and the book I didn't even purchase because I hated it so much, which was the tennis one. I think I'm a little bit soured on Taylor Jenkins Reid. I don't know, like if she came out with another book in this sort of interconnected series, that I wouldn't not read it, but I don't feel the need to own them, and the fact that I have now reread them and they've gotten worse to me is like a good indication that I'm okay to let these go. I've read them, I've experienced them, I can talk about them because they are very popular and people often use these books as like entry points into talking to, like, hey, I like to read too, have you read these? So I can talk about them. I don't really need to own them. So these are coming off my shelf. Next is You Bring the Distant Near by Matali Perkins. This is a YA, like intergenerational kind of story that we read as like a Book Knit Fest book club pick, and we had a great discussion about this. I don't know that I would ever read this, and this probably has a better home for somebody who is the intended audience. The Fever by Megan Abbott. This was the first ARC that I ever received in my baby channel days, and I got it because I like put Snark Squad website like stats, like, look, we get all these views to our blog or whatnot. And I think I even like posted a review of this book up on Snark Squad so I can be like, hey, I did the thing. So I held on to it for a long time because of that like nostalgia of being like the first book a publisher ever sent me, but never gonna read this again. And even then I think I gave it between a 3 and 4 stars. I think 3.5 stars. Yeah, so if I ever got curious to visit more of Abbott's work or to revisit this book for whatever reason, the library is enough. There's more YA that, looking back on it, like I really enjoyed in the moment that I've never reread again. And again, don't feel super compelled to continue to hold on to. The thought of like moving these books is more of a motivator than I would have imagined. If You Find Me by Emily Murdoch, I have like a vague memory of like the premise of this book and the opening scene of this book, specifically when they find this main character who has been living like alone in the woods for a very long time. But other than that, I haven't retained a lot of it, and I don't feel compelled to reread it, especially because I read so little YA these days that I think that I'm fine giving this to a better home. And same for Just One Day by Gail Forman. I love this when I read this. I like credit this with a lot of like my wanderlust in that moment where I hadn't traveled a lot, but reading about this character traveling and like, I don't know, something about it like really like spoke to me in terms of like, oh, like it would be awesome to see other things and to go traveling. And so I held this pretty close to my heart for a long time. I also read the like companion of the second part of this, Just One Day, Just One Year maybe, which I did not enjoy as much, but I don't know, it still worked for me in terms of like tying up this relationship and everything. But yeah, I think that I'm okay to you see me, I'm totally okay to let this go, and I'm like, am I? No, I think it's okay. I don't think I'm ever gonna revisit it, especially because I feel like if I reread it, it would not be the same for me. And so there's some books that like you just want to keep it in your memory and not change it, and because this like specifically, like I am like, oh, that helped me like think about how I wanted to travel. Like I don't want to change that relationship to this story, and I feel like revisiting it as an adult would just like necessarily change my view of the whole story, and that's not, I don't feel the need to do that. These I'm like not even very sure about, but I think I'm gonna do it, especially because like I got rid of enough things that I could put both my baskets back on the shelf, which is how I had it before. And even that way I have like space for a few more books on this shelf. Anyways, and that is with getting rid of these 4 books. And that is the John Green books. I think that I'm done with these. I think again they can have a better home with somebody else in the intended age range. The one that I really enjoyed, which was the first one that I ever read, like I again know it would definitely change reading it as a 38-year-old woman than when I read it in my very early 20s. And the ones that I didn't enjoy as much were all like after that, as I was, you know, getting older in my 20s and like growing out of the intended audience. There's part of me that is very curious because I think that in retrospect, these are judged much more harshly than they should be. I think there is a way that they don't get interpreted within the context and with like in like, I don't know, the very intentional way that they tell some stories, and I do think that there are ways that they haven't aged well. Our understanding of media as a society has like maybe shifted away from some of what this was doing. But I'm not curious enough to reread these all, especially because I read and loved the Anthropocene Reviewed when that came out, and John Green is coming out with another nonfiction book, and he's talked about like writing fiction again soon, maybe. So it feels like I can continue to read his work for adults, nonfiction, and like as it has changed, and I don't need to necessarily hold on to these. I am keeping Turtles All the Way Down. Am I keeping Turtles All the Way Down? Maybe I'm not keeping Turtles All the Way Down either, honestly, because there were aspects of this that I really enjoyed, like the representation of it all, like the OCD and all of that was like really, really well done. I did not love the plot of it all. So I think, yeah, if I'm gonna, why this was like not even my favorite of the John Green. So if I'm going to regift these and find these a new home, I might as well do it for that one too. Even more room on that shelf. So, oh my God, I can't believe it. A highlight from here is What Happened to Ruthie Ramirez by Claire Jimenez. I gobbled this up, I think, in pretty much one sitting. It is a very voicey disaster girl novel. It's very character driven, and the ending is pretty open. It is one of those like things where you have to be in the mood for a snapshot book where it is character driven, but it isn't very deep. It is just capturing a moment in time, very rooted in this main character's voice. So if the voice irritates you, or if you don't like those sort of snapshot books, it wouldn't be for you. But I could not like look away, and I love the way that it captured so many dynamics between this Puerto Rican family and the like little bit of realistic heartbreak at the end. Going on my TBR is the second book in the Firekeeper's Daughter, like sort of related contemporaries. It's been on my TBR since it came out because the publisher was kind enough to send it to me, and I like jumped at the chance. I was like, yes, I loved this book, and I still haven't gotten to it. So seeing this, I was like, yeah, man, I love that book. And I was like, wait, you should read the second one. So Warrior Girl Unearthed is being added to my shelf-inspired TBR. These next two shelves took me a little bit more time. So these are all of my science fiction and fantasy books. Down here is standalones, or there are books here that do belong to series, but I only own the single one, or I only have read and own the single one. So when I read or acquire more of these, I only have like the original Hunger Games copy that I have. I'd love to get a special edition of the whole trilogy, but I don't actually own books 2 and 3. But anyways, so those are single books or standalones, and then up here are series. And I had the most difficult time with the series. Like, I have so many questions. Every time I do something like this, I think about getting rid of the Lunar Chronicles. And then every time that I do, I'm like, they're so pretty. I don't know. I still have not committed to that. I also questioned hanging on to these. I actually have not read The Wise Man's Fears because I read The Name of the Wind. I loved it. And then I was like, oh, I will read The Wise Man's Fears when the third book comes out. And I don't know that we're ever getting that book. And I also don't really like the author anymore. And I feel like the only reason that I'm hanging on to these at this point is because some part of me wants to do like a deep dive into these works and to kind of pick them apart in a way that I couldn't when I first read them, that I didn't see. So that's the only reason that in the back of my mind I'm like, no, hang on to them. But I don't know, that's another big question mark. These books will eventually go because I will be collecting the Fairy Loot editions. I already have House Moving Castle. I have to unbox that. And then when I get the other two, I think I don't need these copies. If I have those other copies, I have to finish collecting these. I only have the first 3. I started to think that I wanted to collect the Eve Dallas series. I do have some of the mass market paperbacks as well. And then like sitting here, I'm like thinking, that's like 60 books at this point. Like, I don't, what am I doing? And then I like took them off to unhaul them, and I was like, but wait, I don't know. I feel like I have to sleep on these a little bit because I'm not sure. I feel like I'm going to end up unhauling them. I don't know. I don't need to own all 60 of those books. And if I don't keep or collect all 60, like maybe I will keep these first 3 in mass market paperback and just have them as like a representative of like these books, and then get rid of the more recent hardback ones that I was collecting. I also thought about these because I have the Folio Society edition of these books, and so like I don't mind having multiple copies of my favorite books, like in theory, but then looking at them, I'm like, oh, I guess if I need more room, eventually these could go, but I'm holding on. I don't know who's blowing up my phone right now, but these could go. What is going on? What else? I think that's it right now for all of those. So let me tell you what I unhauled. Remember I said there was an author that I no longer wanted to have displayed on my shelf, so I turned it around on my graphic novel bottom shelf, but I forgot how many of his books I actually own. So I ended up pulling them all off my shelf, and I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet, because again, like putting them in the hands of other people, I don't know if that's the thing that you do. So, but for right now, they're off the shelves, and I have other places that I can stash them while I think about this a little more. I am also unhauling the Wayward Children series. So I ended up like having the first 2 of these books and reading them and rating them like 3 stars, so I kept them. And then like I've been getting more and more because I've been reading for the Hugos the last couple of years, and so I'm like, oh well, I already own the first 2, so I'll get the next couple because I have to read them anyways, and then I keep adding on. But I don't actually like these enough to want to keep them. I rate them all like 3 stars, and I have a fine time while I'm reading them, but it's not a series that I'm like super highly invested in, and that I would frankly continue to read if it were not for the Hugos. And I just like kept doing this sunk cost thing where I was like, well, I already owned the first 5, so I'll just get the next one. And now I have all of these, and I don't actually think that I super want them. I will read the next one, I'll get a digital copy instead of thinking, well, I own them. It's not for me like the Murderbot series, where like sure, each individual book is like 3.5 stars, but like they are greater than the sum of its parts. I don't actually think that this is like greater than the sum of its parts. So I think it's like a 3-star series. And so I'm finally being like, okay, I don't actually like these all that much. I can stop collecting them. They're fine. I will read if they get nominated for the Hugos again. But yeah, I'm okay to let these go. Next is The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. I read this and I really, really liked it when I read it, obviously, as I say about all of these. But it is, I think I even tried to reread this at some point, but didn't get super far through. I remember it pretty vividly because there's a pretty significant twist when you read this. But it's also, I don't know, it's also of an era where I was reading like a lot more sort of zombie stories and apocalypse stories. But I've never really felt the need to go back. And then Hannah Witton's For the Wolf, which I gave 3 stars or 3.5 stars, and I hung on to it because I was like, well, I might want to read the second book. It has now been enough time and I haven't read the second book where it's like, okay, obviously I wasn't as attached to this story as I thought immediately after finishing it. Book of Night by Holly Black. I read this with House Salt and I gave it 3 stars as well, maybe even lower. I think I might have given it like 2.5 stars, but I hung on to it again because this was one where like the ending was such a hook that I was like, I'm definitely going to read the second book, even though I didn't love the first book. And so I was like, I'll hold on to it. And then when the second book comes out, but the more and the longer that it sat with me, I'm like kind of ambivalent now, even with the twisty ending. I think that it left me off with a more positive and favorable reaction of the book than even that 2.5 kind of like suggested. So I'm fine letting this go. Again, I'm not saying that I'll never read the second book when it comes out. I don't think it's come out yet, but I don't need to hang on to this in order to do that. And I didn't like this book. I need the room. We can get rid of this one. The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart. I will credit this book with having one of my most serious about faces on a character ever, because there was a character that I could not stand in this children's book the whole time, and I was like, that child is like so annoying. And then there's like a reveal about the child that I was like, actually that's my precious baby and I love them. And that is like the most memorable part of this reading experience. It was a romp. I enjoyed it. it, but I never read on in the series, and it's a children's book that I feel like, again, would just have a better home elsewhere. A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow, which I got this for reading through the Hugos, and it was fine. All of my Alex E. Harrow books have been like fine or bad. I just read their other novella, which was the like multiple lives of someone or other. What is wrong with my memory in this video? I don't know. I will put it up somewhere. And I like that novella a lot better. I thought it was more effective at like telling a better, more full story. This was fine. I gave it 3 stars, but looking at it, I'm like, why am I hanging on to that? I will never read it again. I went back and forth on these 3. These are all Simone St. James books. I really enjoyed The Broken Girls. And then I liked The Sundown Motel. I didn't like so much The Book of Cold Cases. I do like Simone St. James, like the like lane she's writing in, which are these like mysteries that have like spooky sort of vibes or some sort of supernatural element. But I feel like now having 3 under my belt, that this is these are books that I will consistently read from Simone St. James, like pepper in through my reading for like a good dependable time, but they're not necessarily books that I need to own. I almost kept them, but when it came down to like space, where I was like, I could use a little more space, these were like kind of easy to be like, hey, I can borrow those from the library, I can listen to them on audiobook, I don't necessarily need to own a physical copy. For some highlights from those shelves, so first I have Osmo Unknown and the Apenny Woods by Catherine M. Valenti. If you've been around this channel for a while, you know that Valenti is one of my favorite authors of all time. My favorite series from her is the Fairyland series, which it starts at middle grade and ages up to about YA, and this is another middle grade series. I think that it did such a good job at doing what Valenti does, which is like creating this world full of whimsy where all of the characters feel really fresh and full and easy to root for and love, and that they all sort of like represent something, and that the journeys that they go on are really relatable and lovely. This is one that as soon as I finished reading it, like I thought I want to reread that, and I think about like all the time, like maybe I can reread this. So it is one that is like sat very well in my memory, and I can't wait to have the opportunity to read it again because I feel like it's going to continue to grow on me. And Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown. I love this book. I think about it all the time. I recommend it, even though I recommend it with like trigger warnings because it is very heavy and very difficult to read. Every time I think about Brown's passing, it just truly I feel is so heartbreaking because I feel like her story and her words were brilliant, and like the fact that she got to share a piece of it in the way and in the format that she did here in Black Girl Unlimited, I'm very grateful for that. And I think of all of the rest of the ways that we could have been graced by her talent. I encourage you guys, if you haven't picked this up, if it hasn't been on your radar, it is really truly a book that plays with format, that takes what is like a biographical sort of like base, a memoir sort of base, and adds magic into it in a way that I think was very incredibly effective, and that like broke my heart, sits in my memory very well as well. As for things I'm adding to my TBR, these are 2 series that I would like to finish. So one is The Thief by Megan Wayland Turner. This is from the Queen's Thief series. I've only ever read The Thief, and I thought it was fine. And one of the things about it that I was like, it feels like an introduction to like a larger story in a way that like was okay, but that didn't really hook me to keep reading. But I've heard so many great things about like the series as it goes on, and I really want to experience them. But it's been so many years since I've read The Thief that I know I have to reread this. So rereading this and getting to the rest of the series is going on my TBR. And The First Sister, I've now read The First Sister twice. I read it and reread it for a book club, and I enjoyed it both times. And I really do want to know what happens to these characters, especially because the thing about this book is that it felt like very fast-paced, and like there were reveals and moments in here that left me like totally breathless. And so like I truly want to know what happens to these characters, and I just haven't made it a priority to move on in the series, so I'm adding that to my TBR as well. So that is it. The top shelf is a carryover of some more fantasy series and classics and collector's editions that I have. and I'm not unhauling any of them. We are back for day 2 of finishing up this little reorg project. It's actually Monday now. I started that on Saturday. I worked until the sun went down and I got everything back on my shelves, which felt like an accomplishment. I was mostly out of my apartment yesterday, which was Sunday. So today I am back and I've got the time to finish this up. So we're gonna move my desk. We're gonna put up the fall decor. I think I'm also gonna take pictures of everything that I'm unhauling and try Pango, put it up on Pango. I've been seeing more of my friends give this a try, like Carmen from Tones and Textiles on Instagram. So I've been influenced to also try it. They're all just like swapping books and writing notes to each other and stuff. It looks very cute. So I'm gonna try it. If it doesn't work out, then I will donate these books as I usually do. So that's on the agenda for today. And I'm also going to try and finish listening to Amina al-Sirafi, which I'm about, I think, 50% of the way through the audiobook on that. I finished reading The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty today, and I really enjoyed it. I am very pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this. And throughout the entire listening experience, I kept thinking to myself that like this was the experience of like easy reading and escapist media that I think about when like other people are talking about like brain off reading or whatnot. I really don't subscribe to this entire idea of like brain off reading. I think that when people say that, they're actually talking about work that they did think about and that they just kind of say this and use this as an excuse for when they're faced with something that they did not think about specifically. And they're like, oh, my brain was off. Anyways, that was a total aside. But this, when I hear people talking about like what they're actually trying to get at is this kind of like very immersive escapist kind of read. Feels really smooth and easy to get through. And for me, in the experiences like this that I prefer, I want my writing to be clean enough to really be an immersive experience where I'm not having my attention drawn by a bunch of like craft and writing and prose things that like bring me out of the story. And this had that smooth prose. And so I just kept thinking about how this is what I want in that sort of like easy read, escapist media sort of category for myself. My one con with the book is that like I went into it expecting fantasy, and there was a way that like the tone and the structure in the beginning convinced me that maybe this was just like alternative history. And then we get into the second half of the book and it gets very fantastical, like magic, fantastical creatures and things along those lines in a way that I didn't mind. I liked all of the aspects of it, even the ones that were more bloody versus the ones that were more like silly. There were some like silly aspects to some of the magic and some of the creatures. Like I enjoyed it. My one complaint really is about like tying those two tones together. It felt like there wasn't like a seamless sort of integration of both of the like alternative history feeling elements of it and the magical elements of it. It felt a little like cleaved in two between the first half of the book and the second half of the book. Still, like that didn't super impact my enjoyment, but it was one of those things that brought me out of the immersion when I was like, what? We're where? On what islands and what creatures? Like that did give me pause. So I'm like between a 4 and 5 stars for this reading experience. I think overall enjoyment is like leaning more towards 5, but when I think about like that one big con, it's like maybe 4. Is this a 4.5 out of 5 stars? Probably. But I also kind of want to let it settle in my feelings. This is another one that I'm curious like how I will feel about it with time and how memorable it will be and how memorable these characters will be. At first, like first half of the book, I was like, I'm enjoying this, I'm having fun. I'm not sure this will be too memorable because I didn't feel like super invested in Amina. And that did increase. I think by the end, I realized that I really did like a lot of the aspects that made up Amina's character, her being a mom with her bad knee and her like sense of duty, but her willingness to do the hard thing. Like she was just a very solid character. And I felt like by the end, I understood her and her motivations and like her decisions. And I really liked the way that like this book left it open maybe for more books and more adventures with a very clear like pointing in the direction of where the narrative would take. And I liked who Amina was by the end of the book, like the new characteristics that she had taken on via her journey. And there were like a few additional like side characters, her husband, her child, that I really, really enjoyed as well. So I wasn't too sure about the characters, the strength of the characters. By the end, I was a little bit more convinced, but I do want to see with like time how this will sit in my memory and in my feelings. So I'm feeling about that 4.5 out of 5 stars right now. That's it. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I truly just sat down and I was like, I don't know, I want to rearrange my office. Let's see where it goes. For somebody who has not made like a lot of videos this year, I really said I'm going to put every like staple video idea ever into this one video. So yay. I do have more videos planned now that I am between jobs and I have a lot of free time and I am in a better reading mood. So hopefully you'll see at least this like handful of videos that I have been working on and ideas that I have coming over the next few weeks and leading us into the end of 2024. In all of that planning, I also have stuff that will be going over on my bindery, both for people who follow me for free. So I use my bindery as kind of like a Substack where if you follow me for free, you'll get what I'm posting and reviewing over on bindery. And if you are so inclined, you can also support me on my bindery and have access to exclusive content. If you have read or would like to read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, any of the books on my shelf, any of the books that I unhauled, any of the decisions that I was waffling about, we can chat about all of that in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. Hello, 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 hello. Let's try that again. Yeah, you know, this video is just, it's